If you weigh more, should you pay more to fly? It's a suggestion from a professor in Norway who says heavier people should pay more for their plane tickets and lighter passengers should shell out less. Dr. Bharat Bhatta says weight and space should factor into ticket prices to cover the cost of fuel that airlines use. We'll have more on him in a moment, but right now I want to illustrate the point for you using a hypothetical example from the world of sport. On the left, Olympic heptathlete Jessica Ennis, who weighs a svelte 57 kilos. On the right, heavyweight boxer Vladimir Klitschko, who's clearly twice her weight. Based on the price of a flight from New York to London tomorrow, Jessica Ennis would pay the standard fare, bearing in mind her weight, but see how much he would pay, considering his additional heft, a whopping $2,000. That's about 86% more than Jessica. Bhatta admits it's a difficult topic.
It is controversial, yes, I agree. And I have also mentioned this aspect in my article, that this is a controversial aspect and this is a controversial issue. That's why we need more detailed investigations about the issue, whether this is type of fare policy is implementable technically, economically, or socially.
So is this a good idea that can help airlines and passengers cut costs, or is it a kind of veiled bigotry that gives carriers another way to make a profit? We went into the streets of London to ask people what they think, and here's a sample of what we heard.
I think that's awful. I don't think that's fair for someone to pay for their flight ticket extra because they're overweight. It's wrong.
See, I used to be quite overweight, and I probably wouldn't have been happy to pay extra then.
The problem is that if you travel and it's somebody who's really obese, it impinges on your space or my space, and that probably is unfair.
So is this a pay-as-you-weigh idea or just a fat tax by any other name, and has it got a slim chance of succeeding? Well, let's bring in Simon Calder, senior travel editor for the Independent newspaper, joins us live from southern Denmark. Always travelling, Simon. It's not the first time you've had to discuss this, is it? Over the years, this story keeps coming up. So what changes have happened over the years that you can specifically point to before this?
Well, Southwest Airlines, the most successful and biggest US low-cost carrier, has for many years had a policy of saying if you are too obese to fit into a seat and secure the normal seatbelt, then you have to buy an extra seat because it's not fair on fellow passengers. Now, in fact, in most of the cases, they actually refund the money because they say if the flight's not completely full, then we will give you the money back. But they actually take quite a hard line. Air France have been coming in with a similar policy, but every other attempt to tax people on grounds of size has failed, and I think that's probably because it is simply unacceptable in customer care terms to make everybody stand on the scales along with their baggage. So instead, the make money in other ways, such as charging an awful lot for your baggage. I flew out here indeed from Stansted on Ryanair and ended up paying as much for a 20-kilogram suitcase as I did for myself, weighing 80 kilograms. When you buy transportation, you're buying a bit of you're trying to get from A to B.
Do you think, I mean, there are passengers that have complained about sitting next to someone that's spilling over into their seat, and that's a legitimate complaint, but do you think the airlines are taking that complaint as the reason for this, or is it a money-making scheme?
I think the professor that you spoke to has some valid points, but actually, when you look at the total weight of an aircraft, the weight of individual passengers makes only a microscopic difference to the amount of fuel consumed. Certainly, there is an issue with customer comfort, and with the world getting increasingly obese, I'm afraid to say, it will become much more of a challenge for the airlines. Yeah. At the moment, every plane, as those of us who fly regularly on low-cost airlines will know, it's one size fits all. That is increasingly becoming not the case. And I guess what the airlines are going to seek to do, those of them which have at least business class seating, is move people who weigh a bit too much into the front cabin and get them to pay pay quite a lot more money. But it is an uncomfortable business. However, the solution is not to make you and me stand on the scales at check-in.
OK, on budget airlines, Ryanair's thought about a so-called fat tax. You know about that. The Dublin-based budget airline once asked passengers on its website if it should charge extra for very large flyers. A third of the people who responded said yes. Back in October 2011, Ryanair thought about removing some of its lavatories to make room for more seats. It didn't happen, and Ryanair has dropped plans to charge passengers £1 to spend a penny. Further back in 2010, the discount carrier liked the idea of standing room-only seats at the back of its planes. Passengers would be strapped into vertical seats. Safety concerns turned that idea into a conversation piece. A very clever airline for weaseling every bit of money out that they can out of these. They are arguably, very low ticket prices. But what's next in terms of these ideas?
Oh, well, actually, what will happen is going to make life more uncomfortable for you and me and everyone who's got used to the idea that, yes, it costs the same to check in a bag as it does to check in yourself. So let's all take cabin baggage. What will most definitely happen next, and I'm not sure whether Ryanair or EasyJet will be the big European airline that does it, is to bring in charges for cabin baggage. So if you're taking a fairly chunky piece of hand baggage on board, anything bigger really than a laptop case, you will probably end up paying for it even though you're doing all the baggage handling yourself. That will be next. I dare say that a year from now we'll be getting used to that, just as we got used to all the other indignities of low-cost travel. But I tell you what, I still wouldn't go back to the bad old days when it would have cost me 3 or 4 times as much to talk to you from Denmark.